What's going on, everybody? Today we've got a 2002 Honda CR-V with a bad rear wheel bearing. It was making a sound. It was kind of a grinding, kind of a clunking type sound that got faster and slower with speed. And so I got this car jacked up. I went to test it. I grabbed the wheel. Super loose. So this is definitely a bad wheel bearing. The lugs are tight, but the wheel and everything is sloppy. And when I spin this wheel, it makes a grinding sound. So let's crack right into it, get these lug nuts off, and we're gonna take the brakes off and a couple other things inside here like the ABS sensor, and I'll show you all that, but let's hop right into it. This is what I've gotten done so far. If you look in here, I got this out. I remember, I think it was an 18 or 17. I also went ahead, took the wheel speed sensor, broke that bolt off immediately. That was a 10 mil. Took the brake line mounting bracket off. Those were 212s. Used the impact on those. They didn't break. Also went ahead, used a 14. Took off the two caliper bracket mounting bolts. There's one here. There's also another one right here. Took those off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pop these brakes off. We're going to continue to take this out the rest of the way. Once we've gotten the brakes and the stuff out of the way, we're going to pull these bolts out, set those aside. We're going to have to break off. There's, I believe, a ball joint. Nope, there's just a through bolt right here. It's probably going to be another 17 or 18, so we'll get this off. We're going to have to take this axle nut off from this side, and we're going to have to get this ABS speed sensor wire out of its housing. And then we're going to take this knuckle off. We're going to get all this parking brake stuff out of here, put it up on the vise, and use the rental tool from O'Reilly's to get this wheel bearing pressed out. Okay, we got this out on the bench now, and I definitely made a couple mistakes in the process in which I did things. You just watched me struggle for probably 25 minutes with this thing because of them. So we'll talk about that later, but let me just show you how it went. First off, you'll notice that this speed sensor, the bolt is, broken, and also the sensor is stuck in there. So that's unfortunate. I'm gonna have to beat it out from this side and get a new one of those. Also, you're going to want to make sure the axle nut, you're going to want to break that loose and get that off before you take your brakes and stuff off. That's why you saw me put the rotor and the caliper and a bolt back in it so that my wife could press hard on the brakes. I could break that loose. Now, the next thing I thought was I saw, oh, hey, these three, I assumed that they held this portion inside of this knuckle. Well, I was wrong. Turns out those just hold that brake plate for the parking brake. So don't waste any of your time thinking that you're going to separate it by taking these three out. Now we're to the normally scheduled, how do you take this out? You get the $325 tool from O'Reilly's. It's just a rental. Don't freak out. It is going to take some cash to get it, but when you bring the tool back, they'll give it all back to you. And I'll show you how to use that to take this out. We're going to first press this out, the hub, press the hub out of the bearing. On this side, just inside of here, it's going to be a snap ring. We're going to take that snap ring out, boom, and then take the bearing out. And then we'll do all of that in reverse. You can kind of see, or maybe you'll start to see what's going to happen here. This is going to go like this on top of this housing. This bolt will run through here. We'll put the nut on the back side. And then we're going to tighten this, and it's going to pull this out. This horseshoe adapter, in my case, is horseshoe D. You get the tightest one. There's 3 or 4 in the kit. You get the one that's tightest to that, and you put it on there. And I'm going to have to be really careful because there's all kind of weird bracketry and stuff. So I'm going to have to be extra cautious, but we're going to attach that like this, and then I'm going to pull that out. Now, as you can see, the inner race came out, but that's not a big deal. All we're going to do is take a grinder, cut a little slot in that, take a punch, get in there, hit it, This is a really hard bearing race. It'll crack, release all the pressure, and this will slip right off. But next, what we're gonna do is take our chiseled punch, pointy punch, center punch, call it what you want, and we're gonna make sure this is broke loose. Kind of hitting it in and around. Yep, see how it's starting to rotate a little bit? That means that it's rotating, it's broke free. We'll get our snap ring pliers, squeeze on those, get that out. Kind of cheat the system a little bit, get in here and help this thing out. Ta-da. Now what we're gonna do is the same thing, but instead of pulling that one inner piece out, we're gonna put one of the big washers that this has on the back side, and we're gonna pull that entire bearing out. So it's something like this. We're gonna get inside of there. And I've still gotta get that wheel speed sensor out. But for now, we'll just, break it off. I also don't advise you use a screwdriver as a chisel, but, I just did it. So anyways, take this, get the right size. I just had a lucky guess. It's just smaller than the inside diameter of this hub. And we will put this on there, put this whole apparatus up here, and do the same exact thing for a second time. So I just got the wheel speed sensor out. It only took about 10 minutes of swearing at it. Honda, this was a horrible design. I know this was 21 years ago, but it was a very bad idea. Yeah. I opted for a 7/30 seconds drill bit, and I just drilled it out. I got the sheathing thin enough that I could take a punch and a pick and get down on the side of it and slip that out and get that hole cleaned up. Now I'm gonna have to weld a nut onto the tip of this broken bolt, get that out. $21 on Amazon, same day shipping. I got a sensor coming, so we'll get that done. And yeah, we're gonna do everything in reverse to put the new bearing in, paying attention to which side has the magnetic reluctant wheel, I think it's called, for that the wheel speed sensor picks up on. Now I'm pretty much ready to get going on the new bearing install, but before I do that, I'm going to take this wire brush and I'm going to clean out this groove where the snap ring goes and also the face on the back side where that wheel speed sensor poked through because it's really rusty and dirty. Before getting the bearing installed, the last thing we want to do is check which side has the magnetic encoder ring in it. I bought this National Bearings wheel bearing off of Amazon, and on their listing it says that this has an encoder in both sides of it to ensure that there's no installation error. If you install the bearing backwards and the encoder ring's not on the side of the ABS sensor, it wouldn't be reading the wheel speed, the ABS wouldn't work, it'd throw a light, wouldn't be any good. What I do is take a really small piece of metal and touch it on this side, and you can see that that's magnetic. You might not be able to see it, but I can feel it's magnetic. And then try the other side, and it's also magnetic. So I believe what they said on their listing is correct, that it doesn't matter which way you install this, and from the looks of it, the seal on both sides are absolutely identical, and there's no difference between the sides on the race, inner or outer. So what we're gonna do is get this pushed into place, and then go from there. Now with this journal and the outer edge of this bearing completely free of debris, we're going to pick out the washer that is exactly the size of this outer race. Again, lucky draw. Pick this one. You do not want to get one that's going to press on this inner race. You will destroy this bearing. You need the one that fits perfectly on the outside. And we're going to put it up here. We're going to put our tool together. But this time, instead of pulling this way, we're going to set it up on the other side a little bit differently. And we're actually going to we're going to pull it that way into the bearing. How we do that is we pick out another washer, like this one, that goes up here, and then we will take this and put our bolt through everything and clamp it in that way. a small tip for you. You'll see in this tool right here, well, camera's doing a hard job picking it up, but there's machining lines, like tons of them, like this was spun in a lathe. And so there's tons of parts, and you can feel it with your fingernail, tons of little lines. As this is pressing in there, those lines make a great visual perspective. Like you can look at it, and you can tell when this presses in, it'll stop. You'll hear the tone of your impact change if you're using one, and this will stop. You know that it's bottomed out, and it's got it all the way in. Pop this off, look in there, our snap ring groove is free and clear. We're now ready to put the snap ring in. Now, this time around, I'm going to take this hub, we're going to get it pressed into here. Last time I told you that you needed to get the perfect size one that fit on the outer race so that it didn't damage the bearings. This time, we're doing the opposite. We're going to get the one that fits on the inner race and not touching any of the outer, because we're trying to press this shaft into these interior sleeves. So we don't want to be pressing on the outside, jamming it through, and it'll be putting a side load on those bearings that it was not made to take. So we're going to use this one. This is the smallest cup. It fits on there, plenty loose. It's definitely not pressing on the outer race. So we're going to get this in there, pull this up around to here. We'll get our bolt going through, and we'll press it on in. Now with this bearing all put back together, it's not making any noises, it spins freely, nice and smooth like it should. We're gonna do everything we've done backwards, put it all back together. Gonna get the parking brake stuff back in here. Make sure you took a picture of this though, because I'll tell you what, you'll get those springs and clips all mixed up, and that's not a good day. So we're gonna get the parking brake stuff back in. I'm gonna put these little arms back where they go, get the brakes put back on, get the new wheel speed sensor put in when it comes in tomorrow. We'll be good as new. When reassembling these rear brake shoes, it can be a little bit difficult sometimes because these aren't such a familiar design. The things that you're going to want to pay attention to is that you have your adjuster and the spring on there. And then how these work is there's this little pin that comes through the back side like this, and will go into the hole right here. And that spring clip sits on there, and you just pop it through and rotate that pin so that way this will hold the shoes to the plate. Then there's a bridge that sits over top of these and holds the two pads together at the top, tight to this arm. The parking brake shoes back together. I had to fight with those pins for quite a while. They're really annoying and frustrating, but anyways, I'll show you this. That's the pin. Up there is that bridge. That's kind of how it goes. And what we're gonna end up doing now, there's 3 springs right here. 2 of them have hooks. One of them just has this little leg that sticks out. What we're gonna do is put that leg that sticks out in that hole right there and stretch it over to this bridge to squeeze these together. And then we're gonna put the final springs back in their spot where they belong on the pads. I've got the brakes all reassembled. The last thing to do is put the jack up on the suspension so that you preload all the suspension before you really tighten down the last 3 bolts that hold this knuckle on. Once we get all that done, we're gonna put the wheel back on, set it on the ground, and get this axle nut torqued down to spec. Remember, when putting your lug nuts on, to always start them by hand, because a improperly started lug nut can cause cross-threading. And then you'll have to replace the wheel stud and the lug nut, and that's not any fun at all. So make sure to always start by hand, and to torque them to in a crisscross pattern. Now we're going to torque down the axle nut. According to Google, this takes 134 foot-pounds. According to TRQ or torque, this takes 181 foot-pounds. Now I've done a couple of these Honda bearings and most of them are right in the 150 foot-pound range. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I'm not going to worry about it. Boom. Now we're going to go ahead, go back in there. We're going to stake the stake nut so that it doesn't back off. And then we're going to put the center cap back on the wheel. And we're good to go. All right, I got that done. Gotta be honest, didn't enjoy that a single bit. We're in Michigan. Snows, melts, right towards spring. It keeps going back and forth. So that was soaking wet. That was no fun. Try to do it in a dry environment. That'll help you a lot. Number 2, that tool from O'Reilly's, phenomenal. Absolutely recommend it. Couldn't have done it without it. Number 3, make sure that you pop the axle nut off before you take the brakes apart. Otherwise, you have to put it back together like I did. Number 4, don't waste any of your time trying to take off those 3 bolts. There's 2 14 mils and 1 22 mil on the backside that holds that parking brake plate on there. Don't waste your time with those. Number 5, pay attention when you're taking the lower arm bolts out. They're kind of at an angle to each other. Pay attention because there's those offset washers that are the camber washers. You need to look at those. Make sure you put a marker or something where they're at so that you don't need to get in alignment when you put it back together. You didn't pay attention and now your wheel's like this because you fricked it up, okay? And number 6, there's a video from that TRQ channel that I was talking about. If you need more specifics on the parking brake stuff, they did a great job of explaining it. But in general, it's really not that bad of a job. Make sure that you're very careful with that speed sensor. I snapped mine right off and I had a god-awful time drilling it out, pulling the chips of the plastic fiber reinforced stuff sensor out of there. I had an awful time with that. So you're gonna wanna be really careful with that. Those are notorious for breaking. So anyways, thanks for sticking around for another episode of TV's Garage. I'll be pushing out more content as it shows up for the summer and school wraps up for this year. Hope you're having a great day. Good luck on your project.